It's been a long road getting from there to here. We're now finally at the last Star Trek movie to review. Yes, we have finally done it. It has taken 3 months of broken up, I started this back in April because, in case you don't know, I record these videos a month in advance. So for me, I watched 1 to 4 in April, and then 5 to First Contact in May, and then this month from Insurrection to Beyond in June, whereas you obviously got it May, June, July. So, we're now finally at Star Trek Beyond, the third Kelvin movie and the currently last Star Trek movie. We are getting a Section 31 movie um, sometime in the future, depending on writer strikes and actor strikes and what have you. As of recording this, the writer strike is still ongoing, and the actors could potentially join in very soon. So it's all up in the air. Anyway, yeah, so my opinions have definitely changed on Star Trek Beyond because I'd only ever seen it the once. This was the third Star Trek movie I'd ever seen in cinema. I remember it well because it came out in July of 2016, and I was still fresh from a breakup from my very first relationship the month prior. Because like I said, I remember it very well because as a kind of promotion for this song, Rihanna wrote wrote, I don't know if she did or not, but she sang the song Sledgehammer um, to kind of tie in for this movie because this also movie came out in during the 50th anniversary for Star Trek, and it's also the year that we got confirmation for Star Trek Discovery, the new Star Trek show coming. That was coming not a year later. Anyway, yeah. So my opinions have changed on this movie, and I'm also going to try and explain the USS Franklin from this movie because it had. I remember when this came out, it confused a lot of people. And it wasn't until this rewatch that I sat down and I looked into it, and I think I was able to figure out the USS Franklin, and I'm gonna hopefully be able to explain it well. But before that, we need to talk about this movie because I've been rambling for almost 3 minutes. So, Star Trek Beyond. My opinions have changed, whereas prior to this movie, I'd only seen it the once, and I really enjoyed it when I had seen it in cinema, and it was one that I meant to come back to um, for years, but I just didn't until I decided last year to do these Star Trek movie reviews. And yeah, it's still a great movie. I still enjoyed it for what it is. And it is a essentially a Kirk film. Um, Mainly in the beginning, it sets it up to be, but towards the end, not really. Because it sets up, Kirk re- remembering his father coming up to his birthday. He's 1 year older than his father was. He's been in command longer than his father was. His father was only in command for 12 minutes and saved 800 souls, whereas Kirk is now we're 3 years into his 5 year mission, and this movie takes place in 2263, which is actually when the original series takes place originally. Um, so yeah, because if you remember in the last movie, that movie took place between 2259 to early 2260, and that's when they went out on their 5 year deep space mission. And the film opens up with Kirk trying to broker peace between one species and another with a MacGuffin that is a Chekhov's gun, essentially, not actual Pavlov Chekhov's gun, but it plays a huge part in the movie. And so he goes back onto the ship. They log it into their archives, and they go to this new starbase for refueling and all that stuff. Probably transfer of personnel, gaining new people onto the ship. The typical stuff whenever a ship stops at a star base. And it's known as the Yorktown, and it's the first of its kind. And it's a beautiful scene. Seeing the Enterprise going flying in essentially what looks to be underwater, but that's just how the Yorktown is built. And we find out three things, four things. One, Spock and Uhura are on rocky terms yet again. Two, we learn of Ambassador Spock's passing because whilst filming for this movie, um, unfortunately, Leonard Nimoy had passed away a year prior to this, back in 2015, and so obviously they wanted to pay tribute to it, and so of course it's mentioned, and then later on in the movie, Spock opens up a photo frame that Spock Prime had, which was a publicity shot of all the original Enterprise crew for Star Trek Five. If memory serves correct, it was a photo that they pulled from Star Trek Five. Anyway, so the other thing that we learned is Sulu has a husband and a child, which we knew of his daughter, obviously from Star Trek Generations. But this is the one thing I remember pissing off George Takei. For just because George Takei was gay doesn't necessarily mean Sulu was gay, and fair enough. It doesn't bother me that in the Kelvin universe that Sulu is gay, but they had done that to pay homage to George Takei, if memory serves me correct. It didn't bother me then. It doesn't bother me now. Um, so the other thing that we learn, and that's the final thing that we learn, is that Kirk has submitted an application to become the vice admiral on the Yorktown to Commodore Paris. Um, and as all that's happening, a shuttle or a escape pod goes to the Yorktown with this alien that's lost her crew, wants help in this nebula. The Enterprise goes, and when they get there, it gets destroyed, essentially. Um, and I was thinking how pointless it was, just destroying the Enterprise, pulling a search for Spock. Um, but thematically, it makes sense that the Enterprise had to be destroyed, because had the Enterprise still been a factor in play, had Crawl not destroyed the Enterprise, this movie would have been over far more quicker than it was. It would have ended in the first half hour than the first instead of the 2 hours that this movie is. Anyway, Enterprise gets destroyed. Crawl and his men take uh, some of what's left of his crew that jettisons in escape pods and shuttlecrafts and what have you. And this movie splits the crew up into pairs that you don't necessarily see in the original series. Whereas in this movie, Captain Kirk and Chekhov are paired off together, which, to my knowledge, from the little that I've seen, apart from in away missions when it's big crowds, they've never really been paired off, except for in this comic book, where in this comic book, it's Kirk and Chekhov who's freshly joined the Enterprise, goes on an away mission with Kirk, and yeah, they're a really good pairing. Chris Pine and excuse me, I have a bit of silent hiccups. Chris Pine and Anton Yelchin, may he rest in peace, was fantastic in this role, in this movie, because this movie actually also came out a month after Anton Yelchin's passing. He passed away in June 2016. This came out in July of 2016. So yeah, he sadly did not get to see the final. I think no, I'm pretty sure he did see the final product, but he didn't get to go to the premieres and talk about it and stuff. And I miss him. I miss because I loved his interpretation of Chekhov, and I've been singing his praises for the past three movies. Anyway, the other pairings are, of course, your standard Bones and Spock, because the back and forth that they had in the original series, as well as the Kelvin movie, is chef's kiss. Zachary Quinto and Carl Urban play off of each other stupendously in this movie. Where it turns out that a necklace um, that Spock gave Uhura turns out is kind of a radioactive tracker that he put onto his girlfriend, which was not his intentions. So yeah, and then the final pairing, of course, is Uhura and Sulu, who don't really get much screen time. Really, it's more so Uhura gets more to do than Sulu, but you can't will 'em all essentially. And then Scotty gets paired up with this new character, Jayla, who brings him to a old Federation ship known as the USS Franklin, NCC 362 no 326 I think. So yeah, how is the first warp 4 capable ship, and yet it's the NX 326. How is that possible? Well, this is where you have a Star Trek expert to actually fill in the blanks for you. So we know, thanks to the episode First Flight in Enterprise, when um, Archer finds out his best friend slash rival AG passed away during a rock climbing accident. That AG was the first person to break the warp 2 barrier, and then in the year 2145 is when the warp 3 barrier broke. So it makes sense that sometime between 2146 and 2151, when the first warp 5 capable vessel launched, that it could happen. The warp 4 barrier obviously had to have been broken, and they would have had to obviously design a ship like the NX Delta, the NX Alpha, the NX Beta. Now, we know that it's called the USS Franklin. So my theory is that before it got the USS Franklin registry, I believe it was known as NX Franklin. No numbers, what have you, kind of like as I said, the NX Beta, the NX Alpha, the NX Delta. So this one obviously would have been known as NX Franklin, and it was given to the Makos, which we do know because Krall's crew were ex-Makos that fought during the Xindi and the Earth-Romulan War. So sometime between the Xindi War and the Earth-Romulan War of 21 something to 2160s. I forget when the actual Earth-Romulan War takes place. I think it was like 2155 to 2161, something like that. It obviously got rechristened to the USS Franklin NX 326. I'm going to completely keep fucking that up. So my theory on the NX 326 is because in beta canon we know that one of the most mass-produced ships was known as a Daedalus class, which I should hopefully have somewhere on screen instead of me trying to explain it. So back during the Earth-Romulan War, it took ages to build an NX ship, as we do know, because for the longest time it is just the NX-01, and it's not until season 3-ish, season 4, a whole 4 years after the launch of the NX-01 Enterprise, that the NX-02 Columbia got launched. So it takes a while to develop these ships. Whereas they were obviously building the Daedalus class because it was the amount of time that it took to build an NX class, they could have built 5 Daedalus classes. Because originally, there was a bit of not necessarily a feud, but a race to see which one would be better, which design would they go with moving forward. the Daedalus or the NX class. And obviously, we know the NX class won out, but during the Earth-Romulan War, they brought out the old Daedalus classes that were decommissioned by that point, prior to, at some point during Archer's run. And so they obviously needed, they already have, numbers on them. So probably at some point in that time, with the Daedalus classes, that the NX Franklin got rechristened the USS Franklin NX 326. That's been my explanation for it. That's it. So let's get back to the movie. So eventually, the Enterprise crew get back onto the Franklin. First it was Scotty and Jayla, then it was Kirk and um, Chekhov, and then Bones and Spock, and they mounted a rescue mission to get everyone else who survived. And that's when Kroll gets the MacGuffin from the very beginning of the movie. He gets that. He's going to use that to destroy the Federation because, as I said, he was the captain of the Franklin, and he believed that the Federation abandoned him because when he crash landed on that planet, he was obviously trying to send distress signals, and no one was answering them because he didn't know at that time that they couldn't break through the barrier, the nebula and what have you. So that's what set him on his revenge path. He makes it to the Yorktown. So does the now new Franklin crew of the old Enterprise crew. They get there, they stop him, day is saved. Spock, who was thinking of, as I mentioned with Spock Prime's passing, wanted to leave Starfleet to take back up what Spock Prime was doing with New Vulcan and continue his work. Changes his mind obviously by the end and sticks around. And Kirk turns down the Admiralty position because, as he puts it, admirals don't fly, do they? And he gets told no. And so he stays as captain, which, if you ask me, is what Kirk Prime should have done in between the events of Star Trek the original series and Star Trek the motion picture, instead of trying to, take control using some obscure whatchamacallit just to take over from William Decker in the motion picture. Anyway, so the movie ends with the new Enterprise A, and the movie ends, and that is that. So yeah, like it didn't grip me in as much as it did when I first saw it in cinema. I felt like I was on my phone more than I should be. Just because, like I said, even though I've seen it in 2016, I knew what happened from beginning to end, only seeing it the once. But I still paid attention to a lot of it. But it's just not as good as I remember. It's not as good as I remember. But that has now been the final Star Trek review. But before I go, I said that I would rank all 13 Star Trek movies when I got to this point. And I have. I have a list here of all 13 Star Trek movies ranked. In my opinion, after doing the past 3-month watch through of these Star Trek movies. So, we'll go in descending order from 13 to 1. In 13th place, I have The Final Frontier, for the reason being of just how forgettable it is. I still enjoyed it, for what it was, but I've already forgotten the vast majority of the movie, In 12th is Insurrection. Again, another one that I enjoyed on my rewatch, but it just there are far better Star Trek movies than Insurrection. In 11th, we have The Search for Spock. Good movie, really good movie, underrated movie, but there are better Star Trek movies than The Search for Spock, to be honest. In 10th place, I actually have this movie, Star Trek Beyond. It's more better than Search for Spock, but not by much. In ninth place, I have Nemesis. Even though I enjoy it, and it was the first Star Trek movie I ever seen in cinema, it's there's again just better movies. In ninth, in eighth, I have Star Trek Into Darkness. I thoroughly enjoyed my rewatch of it, and now thinking of it through the lens of it's essentially a Space Seed remake instead of a Wrath of Khan remake, it makes it not as bad as it as you would think. In seventh, we have the motion picture. Great movie, great visuals, far better movies that surpass it. In sixth position, we have Star Trek Generations. Good movie, brilliant seeing this is the last time we ever see the 7-foot model of the Enterprise D. Good seeing Kirk and Picard interacting, but again, better movies. There are better movies. Speaking of which, in the fifth position, I have the Undiscovered Country. Fantastic send off to the Enterprise crew. Absolutely amazing. I know I had it ranked second or third when I just ranked the original series movies. But ranking everything now, everything gets thrown for a loop. In fourth is Wrath of Khan. Overrated as all hell, in my opinion, and we all know my opinion. But still a good movie. Not saying it's not, but it's just, overrated. In third place, we actually have Star Trek '09, because I put into the factor of I've seen it so many times since it came out, and even on my rewatch, I absolutely loved it. It's pretty amazing, and it deserves the third spot, in my opinion. I know everyone's going to disagree on that, but it's my opinion, and you have your own. It may be wrong, but it's your opinion. In second place, we have The Voyage Home. As I said, The Voyage Home, very, very sentimental to me. It's not. I've seen a lot more people not like this movie over the years, mainly in this community, but I still think it's a pretty good movie. And of course, number one, are you really surprised? First Contact is the best Star Trek movie ever. Fuck you, fight me, I'll see you all next time.